Hey guys, welcome to the PLOspectives episode 5, a show where we explore unbeatable strategies within the great game of Pot Limit Omaha. We take one hand, go through the action, and see how each party should have played their hand and how they should construct the ranges. Here is a disclaimer, don't take my words for granted. Every situation in PLO is different, so do your own research. Results and conclusions shown and made in this video are only true under these specific assumptions, stack sizes, reads and opponents, and rake structure. Now let's jump right into the action. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at a hand that I played recently at PLO 200 tables. So it gets folded up to the cutoff, and we open King 10, King Jack 10 8 single suited, which is a pretty standard open. Big blind calls, and we flop massive. We flop the nuts, and big blind checks, and we have a decision whether we want to c-bet or not. I decided to check back because my opponent was check folding a lot of flops while having abnormal turn and river aggression, so I decided to try to exploit his tendencies and check back my hand, especially that I also block a lot of his continuing range. Jack 8 blocks some of his straights, 10 blocks some 2-pair and set combos, 2 clubs block my opponent from having backdoor flush draw, and King of Hearts in my hand and 10 of Hearts from the table block my opponent from having backdoor Broadway Hearts. So all things considered, decided to check this hand back. But let's now look what Solver thinks about this line. But before, we need to understand what is going on this flop from range play theory. So if we pull up a graph, equity graph, you can see that the equities run pretty smooth. No one really has a massive advantage. Big blind has slight advantage over top 40% of the range, and button has, or I would even say 45%, and button has slight advantage over 55, bottom 55% of his range. And that also means that out of position should be leading around 40% here for half pot. And if we take a look at the hands like King Jack should lead 70%, Jack 8 65%, Queens should be leading 100%, pretty much 98.8, so pretty much 100. Tens 80%, nines 60%. What about jacks? Perfect blockers 62%, and kings 51%. And then once big blind has checked to us, and we pull up another graph, now we can see because we didn't face a lead from out of position, now suddenly button has a massive polarity advantage, and that means that in position when check to should be doing a lot of c-betting here, just a ton. You can see 57% for half pot, and that also means that we have to put all of our nut straights into our c-betting range, because otherwise we get just too, we cannot continue enough versus check raises. Because we c-bet around 60%, we have to c-bet all of our king jacks as well. Not only those, but so Solver doesn't like this check, but I'm glad I'm not playing against Solver bots. I think that makes sense sometimes to go for the exploit. So we decided to check back, turn to the 3 of hearts, and now my opponent leads into me for full pot, and I love it. Not only because I'm trapping here with the nuts, but from his range play theory, the only sizing he should ever be using here is pot. Because once flop gets checked through, out of position has the polarity advantage on this board. I'm gonna prove it to you, showing the equity graph after the flop gets checked through. And now it's out of position, who should be doing a lot of stabbing here for large sizing. It's um, it's a mix. Like, I ran another sim giving out of position the option to bet 33% and pot, and it does mix it sometimes, like 50% pot and 8% for small size. But good luck trying to balance those ranges. I find it much more useful to use like more or less one bet sizing and then deviating depending on the player's tendencies. So I'm gonna be giving you information how to construct your range using one bet size. So once big blind leads into me, we need to assign him a range. By the way, pre-flop I gave him 30% raise first in, and because we didn't face a 3-bet, I excluded 4% 3-betting range out of position. So we need to assign him a range. What is he betting here on the turn? And I assigned his range as any set or better, any pair plus open-ender or better, like 9 jack or better, like any queen 10 9 or 3, no, actually any queen 10 9 which has a jack, or 7 8, something like that. Obviously hearts, and then any pair with the gut shot or better. Yeah, queen 10 9 with that has at least 7 jack or better. I think that makes sense. That's kind of plausible. Another thing to consider here is whether we want to raise or we don't. And given the components in my hand, I don't think I want to be raising in this spot, because I want to keep my opponent's range as wide as possible, keep his bluffs in, and I'm not really afraid of almost any river. Like, I block hearts, I block some two pairs and sets that can make a boat, so I'm not really afraid. Just want to keep his bluffs in and make him uh, continue bluffing and bluff catch. And so I decided to call, and we head into the river, which is the 9 of diamonds. River pairs the board, and this is where things become really interesting. Out of position keeps barreling, so out of position bets for half pot once again. This time betting 50% doesn't make much sense to me. Like, to me, his line is not really believable, because from his range play theory, after leading the turn, he will have a lot of give ups or nuts. Like, he's gonna be leading some sets and two pairs, which are now improved to full house, or he's gonna have complete airballs and that want to actually give up on the board changing texture. And so betting half pot doesn't make much sense. So I think he, out of position, wants to be more polarized here. Not really. Actually, it's not that I think, it's that Solver says. You can see 50% is pretty much never used by out of position. It's 50% check, and 40 is pretty much 50-50 split between checking and betting full pot. But it's actually very logical, like, makes a lot of sense. And so betting half pot here just doesn't make much sense. And that's where I assume my opponent is bluffy, and I decide to bluff catch him. But we need to assign him a range and see whether that is a profitable bluff or not. So head into the bluff catching module, just right here, and we're gonna assume that my opponent is going to value bet any boat. So any 3-3 or better. I'm gonna also assume that my opponent is going to check straights which have queen or a 10 or 9. No, he's gonna check straights that have a pair blocker like queen or a 10 to bluff catch, and he's also going to check 9 here, probably. Maybe not, but so far this is my assumption. And I'm also interested in looking at the blocker distribution, and I'm specifically interested in queen. So we're gonna run this module. Interesting. Under these assumptions, out of position will be value betting 20% of the time, or will be betting, and his GTO bluffs should be like 7.5%. But if he's going to bluff all of his queens, for example, you can see that the darker part here of his air range is actually a queen blocker. So he's gonna have queens 19, or not queens, but any single queen almost 20% of the time, but he only needs to bluff 7 to be balanced. So that means if he's going to bluff all of his queen X combos here, he's gonna be massively over bluffing. But let's see. Anyways, I called. My opponent showed a hand like ace king 10 7, and I think it's a little bit too wide, to be honest. Let's check. Ace king 10 7 should be a check from a solver perspective. Looking at his hand makes me think that he is going to if he bluffs 10 here in this spot, then he's probably going to bluff all of his queens, and therefore gonna be massively over bluffing in this spot. So bluff catching here makes a lot of sense, and Poker just calculates it as a like almost, what's it, plus 19 big blinds, which is a pretty decent result. I guess looking at his hand makes sense to check the flop if we see like these kind of actions with this type of hands. Alright, that's gonna be it for this episode, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm your PLO Bull Flare Race. Stay unbeatable. See you at the tables. Take care. Bye bye.